Before we get started, this video contains spoilers for the following things. You can use the chapter function to skip any sections that you need to. The last one here, though, is a visual novel that took me 36 minutes to see all of. I recommend you at least look into it to see if you might enjoy it before I spoil the whole thing for you. Otherwise, let's get started. When I was younger, I had this recurring nightmare. It went something like this. I was at home in my parents' house. My parents were either in the house or they were out somewhere, and I knew with certainty where they were. But from somewhere else in the house, somewhere I knew they weren't, I could hear their voices. They would call out to me. They would ask me to come closer. Sometimes they would say awful things to hurt my feelings. Even during the dream, I knew it wasn't my actual mum and dad being horrible to me. But in some way, that made it scarier. For a brief moment, I would be entirely alone, and nearby were these things, these creatures, these uncanny imitations of my family members. And they'd never physically attack me or anything like that. But in some way, that also made it scarier. They were inhuman beings that wanted to upset me, that didn't care enough to physically harm me, but did care just enough to inflict emotional damage. My parents were never in sight during these dreams. I never had the option to call out to them for help. I was always left alone in a warped reality brought about by creatures that wanted nothing more than to torment me. It's a difficult kind of fear to describe. I keep wanting to call that altered reality from my dreams uncanny, and I think it's because they always cause the same emotional response as the uncanny valley effect does. Looking at pictures of robots or other nearly human-looking things, recent AI images come to mind, it makes me feel just like I did in those nightmares. I know something is slightly different from how it should be, while I'm looking at a distorted version of something that I should find familiar, a human face. For this video, I've prepared a few moments from different pieces of media that display this kind of uncanny reality horror. The third and final example is one of the best uses of this horror that I've encountered to date. My hope is that through this discussion, you'll come to see why I find these moments so effective, and why they reawakened that old anxiety from my nightmares. I hope you'll understand me, and I hope that someone out there has been reminded of Chapter 77 of Chainsaw Man, written by Tatsuki Fujimoto, is a shonen manga series about a boy who can turn into a whole bunch of chainsaws. Yeehaw! Okay, there's a little more to it than that. The story follows Denji as he learns to be a devil hunter, someone who kills dangerous creatures called devils, born from human fear. Devils are each associated with one concept, and they become stronger the more that people fear that concept. Throughout most of Part 1 of the series, Denji's goal is to defeat the Gun Devil, and you can imagine that one's pretty strong, I guess. While this is all very exciting, the characters and their relationships are the real star of the show here. Denji is forced to live with Aki, a guy whose one and only purpose in life is avenging his family by defeating the Gun Devil, as well as the fiend Power, a fiend being a devil who took control over a dead person. Her personality trait is being annoying all of the time. They start off hating living together, but watching the three of them grow and begin to really care for one another is powerful and convincingly written. You see them begin to make concessions for one another, each of them adapting to the other's habits and learning to take comfort in each other's company. And this makes it all the more devastating when it all falls apart. Aki eventually realizes that Denji and Power have come to mean more to him than his revenge mission against the Gun Devil. After some deliberation, he withdraws from the mission. He returns to his apartment. Denji and Power make him eat something they cooked badly, and they laugh. Not long after, while looking for a way to prolong his life and spend more time with his friends, the Gun Devil kills Aki and takes over his body. Now a fiend, it returns to Aki's apartment, intending to attack Denji. Chapter 77, along with being one of the most gut-wrenching pieces of fiction ever put to paper, is eerie. It begins with the incessant ringing of the doorbell as gunfiend Aki waits to be let in. And here, look at how the onomatopoeia shapes these first 5 pages. It fills the space around Denji and Power, cramming them into tighter panels, warping their apartment into a claustrophobic environment. This place we've spent tens of chapters inhabiting with these characters is suddenly barely recognizable beneath the omnipresent ringing of the doorbell. Neither of them know for sure who's at the door, nor do they know that their friend has been killed. Power can smell Aki's scent at the door, so she's convinced it's him coming home. Denji's boss Makima lets him know over the phone that the gun devil is at his door. With this conflict, Power calls out to Aki, expecting the comfort of his voice from outside the apartment. Not only does no voice respond, but the ringing stops too, mirroring the end of Denji and Power's confusion as the truth dawns on them. We then get a full page without any dialogue, without any sound, followed by one final look around the apartment before Denji goes to the door. It's unsettling. At the end of the previous story arc, this was a home that they had returned to for comfort. Now, it's been transformed into an unnerving and uncomfortable space. When Denji opens the door and we get to see the gunfiend in Aki's body, it's horrifying, don't get me wrong. His eyes aren't visible, the arm he lost in the previous arc has been replaced by an assault rifle. He hardly speaks, only addressing Denji by his name before opening fire. But its appearance isn't uncanny, like those pictures of robots or AI images. And so, the real uncanniness is in how his presence, his existence, distorts the apartment, how the fact that Denji's friend has been killed and his body stolen reshapes their reality under new rules. They fight. Denji wins and kills gunfiend Aki. But here's one final detail. Denji is practically immortal throughout Chainsaw Man. As long as he has access to someone's blood, he can heal any wounds, regenerate any lost limbs, and generally return to how he was prior to a fight. And he heals himself toward the end of this fight, meaning that Denji escapes it physically unharmed. However, especially with the later revelation that the fight with the gunfiend was orchestrated specifically to break Denji, we can't say the same of his emotional state. I won't spoil any more of the story, but I will say that Chapter 77 isn't the only time that Fujimoto creates this specific kind of horror. For a little while after the fight, the world of Chainsaw Man takes on this same uncanny feeling, just like the one from my nightmares. Denji is not physically harmed, but he is worn down emotionally. We watch as his world permanently changes, as his reality is forced into an unfamiliar and unwelcoming shape, just like we saw back in the apartment. Perhaps this is best seen in the uncanniness of Makima's dogs a few chapters later. They should be a pleasant sight, but there's something wrong with them, something difficult to pin down. And the same is true of the wider story world. I love this part of Chainsaw Man so much. It's one of the closest representations of that particular feeling that I've ever encountered. However, there is arguably an equally interesting way in which this feeling can be explored. While Fujimoto paints his story world almost exclusively in this feeling for several chapters, what if a story just barely touched this idea? What if there was just one particular moment in an otherwise normal, non-horror piece of media that dipped into this experience? What if, when a man soon to be the leader of a country admitted to all his crimes on live television, not one single moment in Persona 5 Royal is something I would look at and go, yeah, that's horror, that's creepy, stop showing that to me. At least, there's not one I can think of. Okay, sure, some of the enemies are monsters. A lot of them are. But the early ones are typically pretty tame takes on fantasy monsters. And then you get some angels and gods and all that. Not exactly terrifying, you know? You might be inclined to argue that there's some psychological horror aspect to some of the villains, but it certainly isn't presented in a typical horror-ish way. The things these characters do, like being evil, are horrible, but I don't feel the game is using it to make you feel uncomfortable in the same way an actual horror game might. Besides, Persona 5 isn't trying to be a horror game. It's trying to be a social sim crossed with a dungeon crawler, so that's fine. I wouldn't expect horror. I didn't expect horror. Nevertheless, there is one part of this game that got me, like Chainsaw Man's build-up to the Gun Devil did. It's right where I expected the main game's story to end, and right where it just kept going. So, Persona 5 got a re-release as Persona 5 Royal, which added another story arc to play through, while not changing the main story all that much as far as I'm aware. This means that the main story has a beginning, middle, and end, but then gets a little follow-up story in the game's new year. And so to be clear, I'm talking about the end of the main game, the final palace, Masayoshi Shido's cruise ship. If you're unfamiliar, Persona 5 follows the story of a group of teenagers who travel between our world and an alternate one in which they can affect people's emotional states. It doesn't sound that spectacular, but bear with me here. They use this power to, very responsibly, make evil adult people confess to the public all the evil adult things they've done with a process called changing their hearts. You rinse and repeat this formula several times, taking down drug kingpins and art thieves and the CEO of a fast food chain until you reach Masayoshi Shido. Shido is a highly popular politician aiming to become Prime Minister of Japan. Also, for some reason, he's part of a conspiracy so wide-reaching that he has literally had a direct connection with previous major villains whose hearts you've changed. On top of this, he's been appearing here and there throughout the game's story already, gradually leading up to his reveal as a powerful person in the world of politics. In other words, he's the ultimate evil adult man that you have to take down before he gets elected Prime Minister. Also, before the story begins, Shido took the protagonist to court under false charges, which is why you spend the whole story under probation. So this time it's personal, too. And naturally, you change his heart. His mind palace that you invade takes the form of a luxury cruise ship. As you and your party explore it, you learn just how many connections Shido has across Japan. And finally, you fight his shadow form, the alternate world version of him that represents how he truly feels about the real world. Shadow Shido is not an easy boss fight. Well, most of the fights in this game aren't particularly hard if you're even remotely prepared, so I mean to say that he's more difficult than other bosses. This, combined with how much he's been built up and how powerful he is in the game's overworld, made him feel to me like the main game's final boss. Toward the end of the fight, Shadow Shido blasts away your teammates, reducing your usual party of 4 to just 1. The protagonist faces Shido one-on-one in a tense duel. You have the opportunity to fight back against the man who unfairly gave your character a criminal record. My partner and I played this game together, and we won this fight basically by the finest of margins. We had to heal Joker almost every turn, and the final blow to Shido was his own doing. We happened to have a persona equipped that would reflect his ice attack, meaning that it damaged him and ultimately dealt the final blow when we might have otherwise failed. It was such a close call, which made the fight feel all the more climactic. To close out each story arc of Persona 5 centered on some evil villain, we're always shown the antagonist in question confessing to their wrongdoing, followed by the effect this confession has on the general public.
I have been reborn.
And it's this moment at the end of the Shido arc that made me feel unsettled. I was anticipating some kind of ending to the game. I was expecting a celebration of all that the Phantom Thieves had accomplished. And sure enough, Shido confesses his crimes publicly right as he is elected Prime Minister. But the public, the people who voted near unanimously for this awful man, the public does not react. Instead, we enter this sort of liminal period of time, as if the game were transitioning to another story arc. There is no grand celebration. There is no end cutscene. In response to the greatest societal change the thieves ever brought about, nothing happens. You overhear conversations in which people acknowledge that Shido has done wrong, but then go on to say that they're still okay with him being Prime Minister. Other conversations reveal that the public, generally, just isn't all that interested in Shido's confession. And this is weird because typically if the leader of a country is found out to have done something awful, it's a scandal. It's a big deal. There is a non-supernatural element to this. Shido has enough connections that, when he confesses on live television, his team pressures the mass media into not covering anything to do with your group, the Phantom Thieves. Of course, this steers many people away from thinking about these events. But they still happened, and people are still talking about Shido. They haven't forgotten any of what happened. They just do not care. In between scenes, you get to look at messages left on the fan site, the in-universe forum for discussion about the Phantom Thieves. And this is where the reality distortion is most blatant, because even on a site that people come to specifically to discuss the thieves, nobody's interested in them. The messages people leave go from complaining about the thieves to things like, "So wait, who do we hate? I feel like an empty husk. And best of all, thinking hurts my brain." And here it is. Persona 5 builds up this expectation that you and your group can cause huge changes in society. This is the foundation of the game's story, only for this power to fail at the most crucial moment.
This makes no effing sense!
This swerve created the same uncanny feeling as in my nightmare. The Phantom Thieves suddenly exist in a reality in which they know something is wrong, that something should have happened already, but nobody else can see it. Or worse, nobody else cares to see it. For a while, it's not clear why this is happening, but after a few days, the group heads back into the alternate world and encounters the God of Control, also known as Yal. Throughout the game, he's been pretending to be Igor, a character that you've put your trust in, whether just through his mentorship or because you remember him from previous Persona games. This being imitating Igor is the one that's bringing about the distortion in the world, brainwashing the public into becoming unthinking drones. And while this God of Control does want to eliminate the Phantom Thieves, it doesn't go about it violently at first. Rather, it tries to erase them from existence by causing everyone in society to forget them. This isn't a perfect reflection of my nightmare, but it's definitely along the same lines as only wanting to inflict emotional damage. Anyway, you go and fight said god, and you win, and the world is good again, and people care that Shido was an awful person, and people remember the Phantom Thieves. This is the real climax of the story, and everything gets resolved. Fantastic. But for just those few in-game days in which nothing changed, that old fear from my nightmares was reawakened. That feeling that reality itself has morphed into some vaguely recognizable form, but a form that is nonetheless wrong, one that cannot be allowed to exist. It's a world so wrong that when Morgana asks the protagonist if he will fight to fix this reality, you as the player aren't given the option to say no. The God of Control, not itself creepy or uncanny, has twisted reality into a shape eerie enough that the game decides, for itself, that it must be changed back. There is actually an altered reality arc in Persona 5 Royal. Like a real one. It comes later, in the third semester, and it's created by Dr. Maruki, the protagonist's therapist. Sure. The reason I didn't talk about this, though, is that it isn't really that scary. The reality that Maruki creates is a perfect one, a utopia in which everyone has their deepest desires fulfilled. You personally might not want to live in that world, but it is designed to be, and presented as, a pleasant one. Futaba's dead mother is alive again, Ryuji's leg was never broken, and your cat is a highly attractive man who still sleeps with you at night. Life is good. So good, in fact, that the game doesn't force you to fix it. If you like Maruki's reality, no matter how much the game tries to convince you to oppose him, you can choose to end the game in his reality. There is an ending for staying in this world. It's acceptable, unlike the one created by the God of Control. Sure, Maruki altered reality far more than the God of Control did, but that might be exactly why it wasn't as scary. Like with the Uncanny Valley effect, It strayed far enough from the real world that it had room to be pleasant, enjoyable, utopian even. All this to say, the Maruki arc didn't create that same uncanny dread in me. Having said that, Maruki's reality does share one feature with the other two examples I've mentioned. The protagonist is never alone. In Chainsaw Man, Denji has power with him, and after Shido's palace, all of the Phantom Thieves and even a few of their friends know that the world isn't how it should be. And with Maruki's Utopia, at first it's just Joker and Akechi, but soon it's the other thieves as well who know what's going on. However, my dreams were never like that. So what if there was a game that depicted some uncanny reality in which the protagonist is not only alone, but is also unaware that anything is wrong? What if only you, the player, know that things aren't as they should be? And what would you do if you found an ATM machine in 2024's This Is Not Your House is wrong? Roger doesn't have a bank card on him, yet he can still use the ATM machine outside the shop to help pay for his food and clothes. This is strange, perhaps even a plot hole at first glance. Created by indie developer Trash Eyes, This Is Not Your House is a psychological horror visual novel set in the present day. It follows senior citizen Roger as he returns home from buying food, only to find that his key no longer turns the lock on his front door. So he knocks. A strange lady answers. She is resolutely set on not letting him in and keeping his house. From here, you can choose what Roger does to try and get his house back. And if that sounds interesting to you, it's £1.60 on Steam. Please play it. And that's however many US dollars, I don't know, and I don't really care. Right away, there's something interesting here. Roger owns his house. He even mentions that the deed proving this fact is indoors, and the strange lady acknowledges its existence. Still, the game, not the characters, but the game, refers to this lady as the homeowner. But what are you talking about? She doesn't own the house, she literally just admitted it. That's the whole point of the story. The game's storytelling recognizes her as the valid owner of the house, subtly developing this sense that while Roger was out shopping, his world has changed in some impossible, mind-bending way. Yes, Roger owns the house, yes, the deed says so, but simultaneously, this lady is the homeowner because property is a social construct. She makes the rules now, and the game is happy to play by them. I don't feel like the homeowner looks particularly uncanny in this game, but the way she acts certainly is. If Roger forces his way into the house from the get-go, she tells him that she appears in spaces left uninhabited for too long, suggesting that this person, or this thing, has done this to people before, maybe even doing it regularly. If Roger breaks into his house and wrestles his shotgun out of her control, the homeowner smiles as he attacks her with it. If Roger falls for a trick of hers, he finds that there is another, near-identical woman who helps to kill him and then talks about eating him. Despite not looking especially odd, the homeowner behaves in this inhuman manner in every encounter. And just as we've seen with the other examples I've presented in this video, the homeowner is absolutely a strange being that has arrived and brought with it an altered reality. The changed lock on Roger's door, the way the homeowner takes Roger's clothes in most routes, the impossible duplication of this lady, the way the game itself plays along. The world is operating on a different set of rules than usual, both in the story world and in the way the game presents this story world. Quite frankly, every second of This Is Not Your House embodies the uncanny reality anxiety I felt in my nightmares. This game is that feeling down to every detail, and I had a great time with it. Perhaps something that adds to this feeling is the artwork. It's all pixel art, with each point on your screen either yellow or black and nothing in between. It makes every shape vague and unclear, every shadow sharp and threatening. One of my favourites is probably the shot of the mental hospital. It really conveys this sense of an ominous fate, impossible to escape the examinations, whether it's Roger who ends up there, or the homeowner. But the pixel art isn't always just really cool. occasionally on my playthrough, I genuinely couldn't decipher what I was being shown. I had to look carefully to figure out what angle the shot was from, who or what I could see. Maybe this difficulty won't be something everyone experiences, but for me, it added something to the game. It put me on edge, made me anxious about what could be in plain sight. The game placed me in a world that, despite actually resembling my own, I couldn't fully understand, even visually. And when it comes to things like the art style throwing me off, well, like the game calling the lady the homeowner, that's also something that Roger doesn't really experience. Sure, he's having some altered reality experience, but there are aspects of it that only touch the player, that only touched me. And there's one moment in particular that works exclusively on that meta level. Now, how do we get there again? Let the homeowner keep the house, she'll take Roger's clothes. Spend the night out in the woods? Don't, and seriously, don't eat the mushrooms. Go to the shop to get some clothes and food and... Stop. Right here. Roger heads to the nearby ATM machine to get out some money and pay for the clothes he put on and the food he ate. And it doesn't ask for his bank card, nor is it ever suggested that he might have one. Rather, the machine asks him to place his arm inside its orifice. I had to read this message on the ATM screen like 3 times because I kept thinking I must have misunderstood it. But no, it really says, "Insert arm into automaton orifice." And Roger just puts his arm in. It recognizes him, somehow. It pulsates. He fumbles for the keypad, which, by the way, is inside the orifice, so he can't see it while he types. Like, okay, I guess nobody else can see your pin. But also that can't be super easy to do, right? Then, finally, Roger gets some money and takes his arm back out again. From the orifice. Roger reacts neither to this weird ATM nor to its inconvenient design choices. This thing is just part of his world. A world that, might I remind you, has been identical to our real world and will continue to be so, except for this exact moment. The only difference the setting of This Is Not Your House has from reality is, for some reason, this ATM machine. Nobody, not even the protagonist I was meant to be controlling, inhabiting, seeing the world through, not even Roger, acknowledges how strange this machine is. He just uses it, as usual, like it's part of the society he lives in, and that's probably because it is. This placed me in a familiar spot. I was witnessing a slightly distorted version of my reality brought about by a strange creature, and I was alone with it. A lot of games will go to great lengths to make sure you can relate to the protagonist, or at least imagine yourself in their place. Think any generic or maybe silent protagonist you've ever played as. But here, This Is Not Your House purposefully severed that link, made me feel entirely disconnected from the character I'd been given control of, and it used that choice to elevate its horror. It used that choice to make me doubt my own sanity. Maybe, I thought, I'm missing something. There's a good chance that these kinds of machines exist somewhere in the world, and it seems at least cardless ATMs do exist, so maybe, just maybe, somewhere, an ATM has an orifice to put your arm right into, and then it recognizes you based entirely on what your arm is like. Maybe. But that word, the machine talks about itself like it's some living creature, not saying it has a hole for your arm, or maybe an opening, or even a cavity, but rather you must reach inside its orifice. Okay, obviously this thing doesn't exist in real life. Obviously. The fact that I'd even spent time wondering about it doesn't look great for me, but it does demonstrate how effective and subtle this moment with the ATM was. But now it was time to do what I should have done from the start. Find someone online, maybe YouTube or something, who had already played the game, and see how they reacted to this bit. This got off to a rocky start. This Is Not Your House isn't particularly well known at the moment. I could find neither a subreddit for the game, nor a Wikipedia page, the two indicators that a thing exists. Googling the game's name alone got me like 4 results, and then other stuff of the same name took over. Has anyone else seen this? I was calling out into the void, and nobody responded. I sighed. I remembered that I'd heard of this game from Super Eyepatch Wolf on YouTube. I returned to his second channel to watch the VOD of him playing the game. This was good. I knew that at least he had played the game. The video begins. He talks for 5 or so minutes about the time a stranger punched him in the face. It's an entertaining story. I watch as he completes 3 or so of the game's 10 endings. And before I realize it, the video is over, and I still don't have what I was looking for. He hadn't streamed the route that includes the ATM. All of a sudden, I could not find anywhere on the expanse of the internet someone else who had seen what I'd seen. This frantic search for somebody, anybody, who knew about this particular moment culminated in precisely the feeling I've been trying to describe. I knew something was up with this ATM machine and its pulsating orifice, despite not a single character acknowledging it, and when I turned to the real world, I once more found that not a single person acknowledged it. Something was slightly wrong again, and only I was aware of it. And it wasn't there to hurt me, just to confuse and terrify me. The uncanny reality existed not just in the game's world, but now also on a meta level, in the real world around me, and in how I interacted with this game. This Is Not Your House recreated my nightmare in a way I have never seen any story do before. Thank you for watching. I did, in fact, find a few more playthroughs of this game on YouTube. A little while after I wrote the first draft of the script, I typed the name of the game into the search bar and 3 videos of it came up. One video does not include the ATM, as I'd come to expect at this point, but the 2 others do. The first of these has no commentary, so we're not getting any reactions here. The person in the second video, however, they run into the ATM, are briefly confused by the choice of words, and then move on. Hardly a word spared to talk about how weird this machine is. And I kinda like that. Not everyone is gonna have the same reaction to this moment as me. Probably a lot of people are gonna see this ATM, think, huh, that's so strange, and move on with their day. They'll remember this game more for the other things it did. It isn't gonna get everyone the same way it got me. And in a way, that works well for people like me too. It adds to that feeling that I know something is wrong, but nobody else really acknowledges it all that much. Creepy. Also, if you've gotten this far and still not played This Is Not Your House, you should still go play it. I haven't spoiled all of it after all. I should also note that while I was working on this video, Super Eyepatch Wolf shouted this game out in a recent video, so there's a chance that it's going to become a bit better known by the time this video is out. Hopefully this will lead to the developer making more games, because I'd love to see what they might do next. Also, there were a couple of other potential examples that I could have talked about in this video, but I either cut them or didn't think of them until I'd started recording. The scene with Father Loutermilch in Outlast 2, the final fight against Flowey in Undertale, the first appearance of Gasoithoth in Genshin Impact, and the eclipse that immediately follows. These don't perfectly line up with my old nightmares, but they do each convey some aspects of this uncanny reality horror. So if you're looking for other examples of what the hell I'm talking about, there you go. Anyway, go follow my partner on Instagram, they do all the cool sprites of me in the corner, and join me in the next video. Hopefully that one will be out a little faster than this one was, especially now that I've finished university. Wow. Subscribe and like the video and all that. Thanks very much.